Welcome to Mic Drop, the podcast where relevancy is irrelevant and we don't give a shit about your feelings. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next guest to the podcast. Welcome my next guest back to the podcast. He spent 17 years as a PBR elite rodeo clown, sustaining only one blown-out rectal injury. He's a world-renowned midget porn director with a slew of awards to his credit. And most importantly, he wrote the book on how to be a dominant power bottom. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Clint Emerson.
Midgets, rodeos. Yeah, you've covered all the things I've been known for.
All of your favorite pastimes.
Yeah, it's good times.
Welcome back to the Mic Drop podcast. This is your third appearance, which is the most of anybody. So you've got the
really?
Yeah. I've not had anybody else on 3 times.
Well, it's probably because we live so close.
Yeah,
just makes it easy to fill in the gap since no one else wants to come on today.
That's right. We're also here to talk about Clint's new book, The Rugged Life. Yeah, right? Can you see that shit? Look at that shit. So you sent me this advanced copy. I was flipping through it over the weekend, and I got to tell you, I mean, all your books have been good, but this one, there's a ton of cool shit in there. And I guess my first question in looking through it is, like, I know you don't know all of this shit, or do you?
That's true.
I mean, like, where did you get both the idea to do it as well as kind of the premise behind where to find the information and kind of what to include? I mean, in thinking of trying to come up with an idea for this book, even having the idea of trying to say, okay, these are the categories, or these are the things that I think need to be in there, and where to find it.
Yeah, it was, no, you're right. I do not know all those skills. I do not live by every skill in there. But the answer to the why was toilet paper. I mean, we went into the pandemic and toilet paper was what was missing. And that was the realization that this country has no idea how to really sustain themselves from day to day. Because once there was a crisis, then it was just unexpected and surprising that people would pick toilet paper as the thing that they would stock up on, you know? Yeah. And so I felt like we needed to kind of go backwards in time a little bit, go a little more analog, and look at skills that really can sustain you when there's a crisis. You know, my books up till now, if you look at it, is 100 Deadly Skills series is all about surviving seconds, minutes, hours, days, right? Yeah. But the Rugged Life is truly a lifestyle. It's something that every American man, woman, and child knew, you know, like 200 years ago, right? That's what they did, is everything in this book. And what I've done is I've combined modern technology with your more analog skill sets to create what can be just an experience project to project inside of a family's home, or you could take the book and literally turn it into an entire lifestyle where you're doing it 8 hours a day. Because that's really what 200. If you go backwards in time, people, you know, making their own food, and I'm talking growing the vegetables and growing the meat and harvesting it, and building their own stuff, you know, is what everyone knew how to do. And as time has gone by and convenience has become the new it, and that's coincides with technology, people have lost their way and they don't know how to do shit anymore. So anyway, it was truly the pandemic. I felt like there needed to be a cure, other than, you know, immunizations and all of the more controversial stuff. The cure is self-reliance. The more self-reliant you become, the less the crazy outside world can affect you.
Yeah. What are the 2 key components for canine success? That's effective training and proper nutrition. Fueled by Team Dog brings those 2 components to your family and best friend. The perfect nutritional balance that results in a higher mental acuity, energy, overall vitality, and even an improved appearance. Every product you will find in my company's store was born from the battlefield and not from the boardroom. Let my life's work help you become your dog's hero. No, I couldn't agree more, and it is kind of frightening how disconnected and removed
you know, our society is from that way of life now. Very, very few people, you know, could live that way if they had to.
Right.
You know, I mean, if you think about like a worst case scenario of, you know, China, Russia, you know, whatever, a combination of external factors, you know, maybe, you know, blowing the fucking power grid and fucking up the water supply and all of the supply chain for food and trucking and all of that, coupled with, you know, let's say the dollar is worth zero, you know, tomorrow, like you wake up tomorrow, there's no power, there's no water, the food supply is completely fucked and your money is worth nothing.
Yeah.
95% of the population would fucking die in a month, you know, I mean, like it would be catastrophic, you know, and so it is neat to see, you know, everything that you've put into this, being, you know, one, pretty basic, but two, you know, still necessary skills that most people, you know, have no real concept on how to do. Was there a checklist in terms of you brainstorming of saying, okay, different categories of, you know, food, hunt, you know, like how did that kind of come into?
Yeah. Breaking down the chapters, wasn't easy, because if you really look at all of these chapters, each one is are books. Yeah. There are books and books and books. And the more that I researched how many books are really out there, then it became overwhelming. And then that's when I noticed that there wasn't one book that consolidated the basics into a nice, easy format. And I feel like that's been my job since I've gotten out of Navy, is how do you deliver, you know, information and skills in a digestible way without all the bullshit rhetoric. Yeah. So if you look at like a book on, you know, farming, for example, most of it is boring. It doesn't apply, and you're never really going to read it. Yeah. You know, so my job is, how do I go and take information, simplify it, illustrate it, and deliver it to the reader so that they can feel like, oh yeah, I can get up right now off my couch and do this. Yeah. And so with 100 Daily Skills, obviously those are fighting and shooting and all kinds of fun stuff. But you know, this actually, the rugged life skills actually are the more important aspect that everyone should know. You know, defending yourself and going on the offense when necessary is great. But these skills, I mean, if you just incorporate a couple into your life, it creates that air gap between you and whatever could affect that one thing you decide to take on. Breaking down the chapters, I really had to go holistic, because there's no other book out there right now that delivers, you know, be your own butcher, be your own farmer, be your own hunter, be your own builder, be your own first responder, be your own communicator. I felt like I took the general aspects of life and broke them into chapters, and then put the skill sets there that are very analog in nature, but are supported by the digital world. Because I'm not saying go out and do the Little House on the Prairie thing, right? Yeah. Wear bonnets and not talk and isolate yourself.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, both of us, yeah, I can already visualize that.
Yeah, we'll do that off camera.
Just bonnets and boots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boots and bonnets. That sounds like a good nonprofit coming out of something.
Yeah, I'm with you. But anyway, it was really just give them the skills, give the reader some skills that they can decide. Do you want to just dip your toe in? Or do you want to just go head first with this lifestyle? I mean, it's totally up to you. And it's also built in a manner that whether you live in downtown Manhattan or the suburbs of Dallas or in the middle of nowhere, Idaho, there's skills in this book that people could start doing right now.
Yeah, for sure. To me, what I love about not only, you know, could you do it right now, is some of the practical stuff, like in the staying warm of or be your own builder. It you know, talks not just about how to harvest firewood, but something as simple as 3 cords of wood, and it shows the visual representation of what a cord looks like, not just describing it, but hey, this is what a fucking cord of wood looks like. But also, 1 season of heat for a 1,000 square foot house is 3 cords of wood. To me, it's shit like that connects skills and reality. Yeah. You know, is that like, for somebody that needs a book like this, that has no fucking concept of how to do any of this, they're also going to have zero concept of how much wood that they would need. And I think, you know, in some of the other survival type, you know, books or publications out there, even websites and YouTube channels, like that piece is severely lacking.
Yeah.
Like to me, that's the big bridge between the skill and how to actually apply it and what have you. So I think that's really cool. And the other thing, like the illustrations, just like all of your books are, I think, kind of well known for their illustrations and how good they are. And this is no exception. I think that's such a key piece. I mean, if you look at all the way back to, say, Egypt and hieroglyphics, I mean, that's how they communicated, and even to present day, like most people use fucking emojis more than they do anything else. Like human beings are visual, and good, clear-cut, concise, descriptive illustrations are key, to really understanding and learning stuff. I did notice there's a number of Thoreau and Emerson quotes in here. Were those two guys, I'm assuming, especially a book like Self-Reliance, was that a big driver for kind of the principles behind this?
Yeah. I mean, if you really look at those guys, they were ahead of their time just in their statements alone as it related to self-reliance. I mean, before there was technology, they were already saying, hey, what are the satisfaction of advancements? What is that really going to satisfy if you're not doing it with your own hands? Yeah. I mean, I'm paraphrasing and summarizing a lot of their quotes, but I mean, it's like, it's unheard of. I mean, like they were already kind of predicting the future, and not even knowing what the hell was in store.
To me, that's the most almost eerie thing about a lot of their quotes and insights is back when they did it. If you think about, now granted, the things that were coming out then were very technologically advanced for that time. But it's just that it's almost like they understood the trajectory of where that was going to go. Yeah. And how problematic it was going to become, and it is really fascinating. If you haven't, for the listener or viewer, if you haven't, kind of dug into some of Thoreau and Emerson's writings, you really should. They're one. I will say they make me feel fucking stupid reading them. Yeah, like it takes me 20 minutes to read a page, and I've got to read it like 4 fucking times, really slow, like following with my finger to understand what the fuck they were saying.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's interesting. Like if you look at, I don't know if you've ever looked at like school textbooks and shit from like 100 years ago, dude. Like we have taken so many steps back. Like we are fucking retarded by comparison.
Oh yeah.
Like shit that kids were learning in 5th grade and how they wrote and everything back then. It makes you feel fucking dumb.
Yeah, it's an advanced form of English back then for sure, and we've kind of, like you said, dumbed it down almost to the point where, the 3 eggplant emojis you sent me this morning. I mean, that's where we've come.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guilty of it. I know you know what I'm talking about when I send you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, pictures, and like you pointed out at the beginning, pictures, right? Yeah. It's the crayon eaters out there that I want them embracing my books.
Yeah. I did want to go over each chapter, and if you could just kind of synopsize the principle behind each one.
Sure.
So the first chapter is Be Your Own Builder.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but I was my dad's little gopher, and I wouldn't know how to do half the stuff that I do today if it wasn't for going to get the hammer, to get the nails, not those nails.
The metric crescent wrench.
Yes, metric versus statute. I mean, it's like so many little things and differentiators, just grabbing tools that I learned. But, being your own builder doesn't mean you got to go build your own house, but it's more like just understanding framing, or, mixing concrete. These are things that most of us just hire to have done because we have that luxury. But the reality is knowing how to do it is kind of key to understanding what's going to happen when you hire people to do it. You really understand, is this worth it or not when you're getting overcharged for something that, that if you just went and bought the supplies and dedicated a day, you would do a better job, and you'll have the satisfaction and gratification of doing it yourself. But being a builder is getting your hands in it again, because right now our hands are just, on our devices. Yeah. They're not doing that manual labor anymore.
Yeah. I think, for sure that's the case. I think there's a second component to that is true for a lot of people. And I will say, even myself included, early on in my home ownership days, my dad and I did not have that type of relationship. I mean, it was, couldn't have asked for a better dad, but when it came to, hunting, shooting, building, repairing, stuff like that, we didn't do a lot of that stuff together. He did, that stuff, but it wasn't like hey, go do this, go do that. I also had 2 older brothers, you know, so I think that probably played a role in it too, is that, you know, I was the sports kid. And so he and I, you know, did every fucking sport together. And that was kind of our thing and what have you, and dogs. But anyway, I was going to say, you know, what made me think of this is that I experienced some of that too, is that I think with a lot of people nowadays are so clueless. And again, I would even have thrown myself into that category 20 years ago, is that you end up doing a lot of unforced errors or self-inflicted wounds on your own fucking house because you don't know any better. Right. You know, like stupid shit, like whether it's with your water heater or fucking, you know, something up in your house because you just didn't know not to do it. I mean, that's a big part of the problems that people end up giving themselves, you know, as homeowners nowadays, not having any idea. Like, well, I thought you could flush Nerf footballs down the toilet. You can't do that. You know, it's like kids grow up thinking that like the disposal and the toilet just go to this magic fucking place with a 10-foot pipe going to it that you can just put whatever the fuck you want down, right? You know, and like just little dumb shit like that. It's important to have an understanding. But
yeah, you nailed it. Knowing how something works inevitably, you know, will force you into knowing the do's and the don'ts and how to fix it.
Yeah, at least how to not fuck it up, you know, at a minimum.
Yeah.
Number 2, be your own power grid.
Yeah, so being your own power grid, really, I think, you know, here in Texas, we all lived it there for how many ever days or what was it, a week? You know, the Texas grid went down and you had people freezing to death. And so having a plan on how you're going to supply, you know, at least minimum power to your home is always a good idea, even if you live in the most advanced portions of the United States, because you could live in suburbia or downtown environments and still the power go out because of natural disaster or, you know, freak accidents or whatever. And if you don't have that plan in place, then, you know, you're going to get what you get. Yeah. And that's going to be nothing until you somebody turns the power back on. So having a good idea of solar, you know, geothermal. You know, geothermal isn't talked about all that much or even sold, because if you do it yourself, it's free. There's no money to be made in it if it's really that easy and that free. And that's the most fascinating part about being your own power grid, is that no matter where you live or stand anywhere on the globe, 6 to 8 feet down is a nice, cool 55 degrees all year round.
Except in Iceland.
Well, you got to get past the frost point, then down. And
in fucking Iceland, I want to say all homes or most homes, heating and cooking are run off of the volcanic fucking geothermal heat coming out of the ground. Like people actually cook in the ground. Like, I mean, to me, it's amazing. But like, they can dig up a few inches and bury fucking eggs and cook them, or like roasts and shit. Yeah, you know, like almost like in a bed of coals type of heat. But
I've seen that. I've seen where they did bread. There's a special kind of bread made there in there. And if you dig a certain, water will come up, and the water will sometimes even be boiling in certain places. Yeah,
fucking wild.
Yeah, it's cool.
You know, you mentioned one thing that even in being more technologically advanced, I think it's counterproductive. I think the more kind of technologically advanced and more urban environments, the more complacent people are. Oh yeah. As well as when shit does go wrong, the more scarce resources are. You know, because there's so many fucking people packed into an area, and it's like it's a double whammy that way. But
and they're real quick, you know, to blame the power company and blame everyone else. But the reality is right now, while you have power, you should be thinking about what's your backup plan. Is it, you know, a $5,000 generator goes a long way in a time of crisis.
Fuck yeah, it does. Yeah, I mean, my truck has a 7,300 watt generator built into it. I've used the shit out of it. Yeah, it's super, super handy. Number 3, be your own farmer. Does that include weed?
It certainly should these days. There's but yeah, you can learn how to grow weed with that chapter, no doubt about it. Because it's just given the basics. I mean, look at, you know, majority of this country where you grew up. I mean, farming is a cornerstone, foundation, staple item of America, and most people don't even understand how that. I mean, unless you go back to elementary school when you took those little itty bitty seeds and you put them in a wet paper towel and wait for them to sprout and go through the process. That's your first and only time you're exposed to farming. Yeah. Now, once again, I'm not saying you got to go out and, you know, buy a couple of acres and plant corn, But what I am saying is that it's very easy to, once again, self-reliance being the goal, to supplement some of the things you have going on right now. If you live in an apartment in the middle of downtown, you can have a windowsill garden, just nothing but herbs, and it's a great way to start, where you're kind of pulling your own basil for your meals every night, and it's a satisfying and, once again, a small little step to self-reliance.
Yeah. So on the farming aspect of it too, I think it's pretty relevant right now. You're seeing food prices skyrocketing, and a lot of this is foreign policy fumbles, I think. But
yeah,
you know, Ukraine and Russia, with the shit that's going on there, you know, they're calling it the breadbasket, you know, whatever, this percentage of wheat and fucking sunflower oil and what have you comes from there. And I can't help but think, why the fuck does it matter what they produce or don't produce? Like, have you not seen the Midwest? You know,
right.
Like, I know you guys fly over it every campaign year, and you go to Iowa for the for the first fucking you know, caucuses. But you know, I mean, like, we shouldn't have any fucking worry when another country stops producing something. You know, I mean, there's no shortage of resources here to do it. And I think, in really looking at all of these chapters, is that if everybody has a higher level of self-reliance, the collective country, from a national security standpoint, has a much lower level of dependence on any other country that way.
No doubt about it.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I dig into a little bit of that in each chapter, because if you just govern yourself and, you know, put the phone down and learn a couple of things and start to implement them, then, like I said at the beginning, you're creating that air gap between you and all this other chaos going on.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to me, there's a national security backdrop to every one of these skills that I think people don't realize.
No,
number 4, be your own butcher. That sounds fun.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you know it, and I've learned it. But you know, the parts of an animal and how to really leverage every part of an animal is important. You know, people that do it for the first time, you're probably going to waste 50% of that animal, but you're going to get better and better at it, and learn how to really enjoy and put that animal to good use as it should be. It's not about, it sounds horrible, right? The whole butcher thing. But once you get into harvesting your own meat, you understand that it's really, once again, it's a staple skill that, everyone should at least understand, so that if you do go and you're on the hunt and you've got meat, you can do the basics. Yeah. It's still a basic skill that's very foreign to a lot of folks.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, to me, there's an element of harvesting your own food and being able to do that is a very inherently genetically ingrained and primal component to being a human being.
Yeah,
that so many of us have lost. Mm-hmm. Chapter 5, kind of dovetailing onto that: be your own hunter.
Yeah, there's the big 3 of this book that I've identified that everyone should, it's be your own builder, be your own farmer, be your own hunter. And the farming and the hunting are interchangeable, because maybe you don't have time, maybe you don't have land to do the farming thing. Well, then hunting is a great alternative, along with foraging, so that you can now have, your plate full, with a well-balanced meal, right? But both are equal in the sense that there's a lot of patience involved in hunting, but having a basic understanding, going back to our roots, is key. And once you kind of have all 3 under your belt at a basic level, you'd be surprised just at how advanced you really are.
Yeah.
Just by maintaining some of those skills. But hunting, I mean, let's face it, it's become more and more popular, especially bow hunting, which we touch on a little bit in there. But I built the book so that people get more of a general knowledge of hunting and the patience that comes with it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, if you can't hunt or harvest or capture your food, then you're going to starve.
That's right.
It doesn't matter how good of a butcher or builder you are, right? Number 6, be your own homemaker. This is more your feminine side.
This is it's more my Martha Stewart side.
So how big of a role do colors play in being your own homemaker?
I mean, setting the ambiance. I like candles, not colors, and I like scents. But so be your own homemaker is exactly that. I was surprised at And I think you too. I mean, we all know coconut oil.
Yeah.
For really only maybe a couple of
coffee and jerking off.
There you go.
That's pretty much all I use it for.
But you can actually do a whole lot more. And so we get into how to make your own pomade, shampoo, and conditioner. Of course, coconut oil combined with, beeswax makes all kinds of stuff. And once again, getting families to be families again, grab a project out of the book, get in your kitchen, knock it out. And I tried to vary the environments, right? It's not the rugged life isn't about, I got to be outside doing all these, hard things. It's also about just having an understanding of the more home-based stuff that you could be doing that makes you self-reliant and not rely on stores or supply chain issues or, the economy.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, it's all connected too, is that like there's certain basic tenets of every aspect of your life that all kind of, have a synergy with one another. I will say that makes me think of something different. Not going to show you guys what that is. I'll just say it's on page 170. If you miss it, then we can't be friends.
Yeah, there's always subliminals in my stuff.
That's for sure. I love it.
Especially the rabbits.
That's right. Be your own protector.
Yeah, that's a little connected to 100 Deadly Skills. But, let's face it, having a basic ability to protect yourself, your home, your loved ones is once again a staple item. You gotta have a plan. You got to think through it and implement some good safety security, just so that you got the peace of mind for you and your family.
How big of a role, I mean, I know how I feel about it, but in terms of like being realistic, especially about being your own protector, is that there's kind of different levels of expectation as an individual. There's some people like, I think half the battle is being honest with yourself about what you're really capable of versus not, and making accommodations or, compromises with that to a certain extent. Like, hey, if you're, a 78-year-old, hip replaced grandmother, like there's going to be things that you probably focus on more from like a early warning camera, alarm based stuff versus, a 24-year-old fucking 6'4", 230-pound former high school linebacker that, so do you put any credence into that, or is it just more general purpose? Yeah,
of course. We really focus in that chapter about the big D's, right? So in both the corporate and now it's kind of moved over into home security is, creating a layered perimeter all the way to what's important, and what's important being in the center of that perimeter. And it's leveraging these D words. So the outer is, you want to deter, right? You put up signage, you can put up beware a dog, you can put up, hey, electric fence, different signage and psychological things that make a bad guy go, I'm not even going to mess with that property, right? Yeah. And just deter them altogether.
Yeah.
Lighting plays a big deal with that too. Like illuminate the crap out of the inside, keep the inside dark, right? So simple practices that we go over through the 5 Ds and explaining each piece and then how to implement it no matter where you live. And it applies to both young and old alike.
Yeah. Yeah. You had me at the big D.
Big D, yep.
Chapter 8, be your own RTO or communicator for those not familiar with that acronym.
Yeah, so RTO, I get a lot of questions on what that is, radio telephone operator. It is the comms guy in the military, and it's a piece of the lifestyle that most people don't think about. It's very rare even on the homesteads. To go backwards a little bit, I went to different families that live varying degrees of the rugged life. One family lives on grid. And when we say on grid, off grid, that's really where is power, water kind of coming from? So are they providing it themselves or are they relying on the city or the state? So some are on grid, some are off grid. But out of all the families I talked to, only one, actually one of your guests, Rapier's, actually had a comms plan. And then we're talking beyond phones, because if phones go down, you still need a way to communicate. And so I broke that chapter down so that you're getting a layered approach. You've got, how do I communicate with the people in my home or on my property? How do I communicate with people outside of it? And then how can I communicate further? And then of course, what's the most important? Number one is I need information. So a shortwave radio is great even when the power is down or the phones don't work, because now you can still tune in, and over the National Broadcast System, which has been around for decades, you can collect pertinent information about what's going on in your area for free. And so having a shortwave radio is a good idea. And then I just build from there so that people can go out and very quickly build their comms plan and not spend a lot of money. This book isn't about spending money. It's about making you go out and leverage and use all of the technology that's out there, but it's really cheap. And then now you've got it, you got that peace of mind, and you know that, one, I can communicate beyond cell phone, and I can also collect information without relying on, my cable provider.
Yeah. No, it's a huge component that, again, similarly to the, if power and water is gone and the dollar is worth nothing, add to that cell phone towers are knocked out and there's no internet, and I think that, that's an important thing to consider. Chapter 9, be your own first responder.
Yeah. I think, knowing, how to solve problems when it comes to your health, it's both trauma and on the disease process side. If you, and knowing your place, right? If you live way off grid, then you probably need a little more medical training than the average person. If you live in suburbia, then obviously you got 911 probably 7 minutes away. So you really have to kind of understand the environment in which you live in, and then determine, kind of rack and stack your skills and capability based on that. But everyone should have at least a baseline of EMT basic, you don't need to be all the way to like paramedic level or, PA or, doctor. But having that good understanding of trauma medicine and disease process goes a long ways in solving problems until real help gets there.
Yeah. No, I mean, that can be the difference between making it and not making it is a couple of little things like that, which obviously, you've put me through a fair bit of medical training in the SEAL platoons we did together, but, just some of that basic knowledge, can be life-saving. No doubt about it. Chapter 10, be your own handyman.
Yeah. Going back to builder. I mean, I think a lot of folks have, lost their just basic capabilities of tinkering and fixing and doing it yourself type stuff. Now it's really popular. People watch a lot of videos on do it yourself, but I feel like there's not too many people actually putting it to use. So that chapter is dedicated to really giving you the skills, but more so like the differences between like, the rating or the torque on a drill. When you see the dial, it says 1 to, let's say, 13, or sometimes it has a screw on one end and a drill bit on the other as you dial it in. And most people don't understand that numbering system. So I went ahead and explained it for them in there. Or, they see nails. And it's like, I went ahead and said, yeah, there's all these nails in the world. There's all these screws in the world, but here's what they're really used for, So that when you're standing at Home Depot and you're looking at 1,000 sets of different kinds of nails, it's probably important you walk in there with that little bit of education beforehand, save yourself a lot of time and money.
Yeah.
And so that's really, Handyman kind of breaks all those basic stuff down for you.
Yeah. No, it's good stuff. So, I mean, in all 10 of these chapters, again, it makes me think, it kind of reminds me of insurance or, a seatbelt, in that it's not something you think about until you need it, but those are also both things that if you wait until you need it, you're fucked, you know, and you don't realize how woefully fucked you are until that happens, and so I think, for anybody listening, you should at least at a bare minimum as a citizen of the United States, you should at least think about the prospect of waking up tomorrow where the U.S. dollar is worth basically nothing, or money doesn't get you anything anymore. The power grid and water grid has been fouled and it's not working. Cell phone towers are down and there's no internet access. Is that likely that that's going to happen? It's probably not likely, but it's goddamn sure possible, especially with what's going on now and the ramping up of both Russia and China and how technologically advanced they are in terms of cyber attack and attacking infrastructure and stuff, is that at a minimum, you should at least think of that scenario and have some general fucking plan for what you would do if that happened. Because if you have no plan and that happens, you've got about 72 hours before you're probably fucking dead.
Yeah.
You know, and so to me, what I think is really neat about this book is that's kind of the answer to all of that. You know, is that it gives you a really good general idea on how to make it to where if that happened, you'd still be okay. You know, and even if that doesn't happen, you know, again, I can't stress enough, both for you individually and, you know, as a collective society, the more self-reliant each individual is, the stronger the collective country is, you know. So it's a fucking awesome book. I love it. I appreciate you writing it and sending me one. And is there anything that you want to add to that, or that you wish was in there that isn't, or anything like that?
No, I think it's, I mean, each chapter, like I said, are dozens and dozens of books out there. There's just nothing that holistically covers the basics of what you need to know in order to be, you know, generally self-reliant. And it's important to note the Red Dawn scenario of the sky filling with red parachutes and us being taken over. You know, it's not going to happen that way. It's going to happen on the cyber digital front first. You know, when you bring up China and Russia, I mean, they are not so much Russia. I've always said that Putin and Russia have been paper mache tiger, you know, more bravado than actual action. And
whereas China's the opposite.
It is.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's always been, Putin himself has always been a bigger bark than a bite. And we're finding that out as tanks run out of fuel, and they didn't even think about main supply routes, right? It's like the first thing you should do is think about main supply routes. And he just kind of put that as last. And now he's having a hard time playing catch up. But, and then, you know, my honest opinion, I think once he has his land bridge, you know, kind of secured, then I think things will lighten up over there. But, you know, China is really the big, their first option weapon system is stolen technology from the United States, you know, electromagnetic pulse capability put on 2 submarines. And if they wanted to, they could put one of their subs in the Atlantic, one in the Pacific, fire off those EMPs that they stole from us, and the wave would meet in the center of the United States and would just basically fry every piece of electronics we have. That's their first weapon strike option. It's not nukes, right? Nukes is, it's cool and all at one point in history, but now things have kind of surpassed that. And if you hit us with those EMPs, well then, you know, you're back to caveman, you know, caveman world here in the United States, unfortunately. And anything that's plugged in fries, because the most people don't know, but EMP specifically will attack anything that's plugged in, because the cord acts as almost like an antenna that's both connected to the grid and to the device you're charging. And it's a scary scenario, but that's not what the rugged life is about. That is the plan for the worst, hope for the best. But the reality is the rugged life is about just people taking more ownership and self-reliance, and stop relying on, you know, clicking on a few, you know, links on your phone and having food show up to your front door. Convenience is what has made us complacent. Convenience is what's made us lazy. And that is the overall scary thing.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's a very appropriate time for this book to come out. And yeah, again, I appreciate you writing it again. It's called The Rugged Life. Check that shit out. You can get it pretty much everywhere, right?
Everywhere books are sold. Yep.
Amazon. At the Nudie Mag store, the XXX on the highway.
Probably.
Yeah.
Referring to the illustration that you pointed out on page 170.
That'll give you a tip. So speaking of China and Russia, you know, we've gone over kind of the 30,000-foot view of your military career in the first time you were on, and a little bit in the second. What I would like to kind of focus on now is just some of the things that you did, and as you've been out a little while now, kind of, you know, going over some of the intricacies of some of the, you know, pretty high speed shit that you've done at different commands there. If you could, I mean, we kind of glazed over each component of where you've been and the general summary of what you did there. But, you know, towards the later end of your career, you know, after you and I worked together at SEAL Team 3, you know, we deployed to Iraq together, we came back, I went one way, you went another way. If you could kind of pick that up, I know there's certain things that you can't get into, but if you could kind of go into where you went from there and some of the good shit that you did, you know, stemming from those commands, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I think, you know, since the publication of The Right Kind of Crazy and the fact that it went to the Pentagon and, you know, they redacted, you know, 100 pages of that damn book, it's given me the flexibility now to know what I can and can't talk about. So, first and foremost, I think it's important to define covert, right, and define clandestine, because even my closest friends use those words poorly. So I think folks would find it interesting, and I define it very simply as covert is when you hide the sponsor, right? You're hiding technology used in the operation, but more importantly, you're hiding the money trail, because it's the money trail and technology that will burn you every fucking time. And so for something to be truly covert it's very difficult these days, especially as technology advances. You know, a perfect example of a covert operation going poorly was in Italy during a rendition. You had 17 CIA operatives identified because they were using phones that were then connected to government work, you know, and that's just the first layer. You know, cell phones, there's a term in the covert world that technology kills, and it's very true. You never carry your devices, you never carry anything with you, and there's a lot of forethought that goes into keeping something covert. So hiding the sponsor. So in most operations, hiding the sponsor means you're hiding the United States government from that action. Clandestine. Now, clandestine means you're hiding the actions, right? And so in order for anything to be covert, you've got to have these clandestine actions take place, which are things that can happen sometimes in plain sight and nobody notices it, or they're things that happen, you know, under the cover of, you know, darkness and, you know, in one cycle of the night. But clandestine means hide the action, and then covert means hide the sponsor. And so my last part of my career was dealing pretty much 100% in these covert actions at varying levels, you know. So I worked for an agency in DC and did that for a while. I wore a lot of different hats while I was there. And, you know, there were some deployments connected with that. And really it boiled down to employing technology against our adversaries, you know, and you'd be amazed at the kind of technology we've got going on these days that would probably make the average person feel very more secure about what's going on. You know, I see the news and I'll see, you know, things about whatever, it's China and, you know, whatever country du jour that we're concerned about. You know, for a while there it's North Korea, you know, and it's China, now it's Russia, and, you know, and it kind of goes back and forth between our favorite adversaries. But, you know, from my angle, knowing the kind of technology that's been employed against these adversaries makes you go, we're all right. You know, we got some things in place. And I think, you know, it's good that it stays secret. It's good that it's not openly public, because obviously anytime we do something against them or use technology against them and they figure it out, then they're gonna go ahead and create a stopgap for that. And then now we're back to creating new ways of getting in or getting out or whatever it is we want to do to them. Can you talk about the some of the hats you wore at that command? Yes. I mean, so one was I ran a pipeline of education where we transitioned operators, if you will, to operatives, right? And at the time, it's like, you know, it was kind of like new and unheard of, because you would think an operator would be the exact opposite of an operative, you know. And when I say operator, I mean you're wearing body armor, night vision, you've got your gun, you're kicking doors in, and you're shooting people in the face kind of stuff. And an operative is literally the opposite of that. You're not working in a team environment. You're working more solo and independent or in pairs. and you're wearing business casual, you're flying business class, and you're doing what you and your 22 buddies used to do, but now you're doing it by yourself, right? But for me, I felt like taking operators and turning them into operative was the best, even though there was a lot of people that said, no, that's a horrible idea. I felt like it was a great idea, because taking a combat experienced guy that's already got basic soldiering skills, field craft, and now you give him offensive and defensive tradecraft, holy fuck, you've got a tool that is far more superior than the Harvard graduate that you grab, and then you give him some just tradecraft without the soldiering skills, without the field craft, without the combat experience, and expect him to pull off shit that takes balls, takes courage. You know, those are things that you don't just get in, you know, a 6-month school. Those are things that you figure out over time, because that is, you know, that is what you're getting when you take an operator and put them in an operative kind of place. Yeah. And so that pipeline was one thing. And when I wasn't doing that, then I was deploying and using skills. And literally at the beginning, I didn't even know what the hell I was doing, right? I just got lucky to be put in this position and go overseas, go figure it out, you know, and then come back, literally take my lessons learned and implement them directly into the next training that the next set of guys were coming through. Yeah. And then I would go deploy again and take those lessons learned and put them right back into the training. And eventually the pipeline became a standard, and then was eventually went from a Naval Special Warfare specific program, got funded, and then was recognized by SOCOM and became a SOCOM course of instruction. So it was my baby for the longest time. And then a particular set of skills taught in that pipeline then became my specialty, which is CMOE. And CMOE stands for Clandestine Methods of Entry, which is, you know, basically getting in and out of targets, leaving zero attribution to the United States government, which is the covert side, and zero forensics, which is the clandestine side, and not connecting it to myself or to, you know, our great country. And so, you know, you go out and you do one or two and you get some successes. And then after that, there was only me and really another guy that were kind of doing it regularly. And then once you get those successes, then all of a sudden, you know, everyone's throwing all kinds of work at you. Yeah. And I had the opportunity to, you know, basically get in and out of structures, vehicles, vessels, and containers. And to my knowledge, there aren't too many other team guys or SEALs that had the opportunity to get in and get out of all of the different things we trained to. And I would say that CMOE is probably one of the most intricate operations you pull off, because it requires like an intense amount of surveillance. Like you have to identify all the key holders to the target. That's if there's a landlord, you have to know who the landlord is and where do they live, and then make sure you've got eyes on them to learn their pattern of life. And that's the outer layer of the target, right, is the landlord scenario. Yeah. Then you have housekeeping, right? If they have housekeepers, okay, do they have keys? Where do they live? Put them under surveillance, okay? And you work your way all the way to the person who lives in that target or drives that target or visits that target. And so you've got to have a lot of knowledge before you even think about going into the target. And then you have close target reconnaissance, which is now, okay, we've got all the key holders identified. Now we've got to go, what obstacles are we going to face when we get to this target? You know, your world of dogs, holy shit. You know, that's going to be like a borderline no-go, but it depends, right? You just got to sit and you got to watch the target. Alarm systems, holy shit, another big ass world. I remember visiting, you know, the FBI, and they have I think it's 60,000 square foot warehouse of every alarm panel that this world has to offer. And it's like a library of alarm panels, you know, and a library of infrared, like passive motion sensors, and a library of door sensors, and a library. So just imagine this shelves and shelves and walls and walls. And that's when you walk into a place like that, that's when you realize, like, oh, this is a full-time job. Just this piece.
Yeah.
Understanding and knowing alarm systems. And then you have locks. There was a Target I went to that made me realize you have to understand colonization of an area. Who would have thought? A SEAL going, what's the history of this country? What is the colonization of this country? Oh, well, you can go up to the door and there's an Italian lock. There's a British, like basically a British standard lock. And then there's a 5-pin tumbler, all on one door, right? And you have to assume all three are being used, and all three work very different than the other, right? They're all completely different lock systems. So you're like, holy shit, I didn't expect that. Go back, start doing some studying, start going, hey, call up your Brits, my buddies over there, and go, hey, we need to come over and, learn these British standard locks, because they are a pain in the ass. Now, for them, it's no big deal.
You put them on a quick set or a Schlaggy or whatever, and they're like, what the fuck?
Right. Now, 5-pin tumblers for them, is probably, it's a less of a question mark than British standard locks. Those are old school, what you see skeleton keys are used for, and they have these big, they're not pins. They're like these plates inside that move at different heights. And it's a totally different way to try and get past a British standard lock than it is a 5-pin tumbler that we're used to here in the United States. But bottom line is, when you really look at how much there is that you have to collect, it's almost overwhelming. And, and that's not even counting the target themselves. So, when you look at the target, the human going in and out of that vehicle, that structure, that container, that vessel, it becomes kind of the
smallest piece,
the smaller piece, because you really have to understand that neighborhood, that harbor, that skyscraper, and then you narrow it in, but you're keeping track of everything the whole time. So that's why I started with saying it's one of the most challenging operations to pull off and maintain a level of covertness and clandestine that's out there. I mean, at least in my experience, it was one of the most challenging, but also probably one of the most fucking adrenaline flowing, fucking, it's one of the coolest damn things.
Makes everything else seem fucking boring.
You go in and you're like, holy shit, and it's just you, and all that success and all that failure is always 1 second away from, being your greatest or your worst moment. I mean, it's like,
and it's all on your shoulders alone.
It's a lot of times it's all on you. If you get lucky, there was times when you got, maybe some other forces or partner nations that could help out on the surveillance side, but it's a lot of work. And so I had the opportunities of deploying and doing that type of stuff in different capacities. That it's definitely the most gratifying, satisfying thing you could do.
Yeah. Have you kept track or have a ballpark idea of about how many of those real world scenarios that you participated in?
I mean, dozens, probably, if I really thought about it. Like, there was times when I'd go for, let's say a 3 to 6 month block, but that whole time, you're targeting specific things, and that information sometimes leads from basically from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, So when I would leave the United States, a lot of times it started with maybe 1 or 2 things that needed to be accomplished. But then while you're there, it turns out that it turns into, a half a dozen things that need to get done in order to achieve the one.
Right.
Right. There was, a moment when, just being in country, there was some human guys that were like, hey, we just have some sources we need vetted. We don't know if they're on our side or on the bad guy side. Do you think you could, get into his vehicle and take a look around. I'm like, sure. Like that was just spontaneous crap, right? Or, hey, he's coming to like, let's say this certain hotel, and we're going to go ahead and, you know, give him the quick search, and his briefcase or messenger bag will be put over here. Do you think you can get into those and see what you find? Sure. Right. So there would be these oddball, weird little things that would sometimes pop up just for the nature of work that I was there to do. And if they knew about it, then they'd be like, hey, can you help us on this and help us on? And before you know it, you've racked up a dozen little itty bitty CMOE operations that I would have never predicted, you know?
Did any of those little ones turn into like just the total fucking lucked out, like, holy shit, this is this guy and he's connected to this guy? Were there any of those like total just lucky moments that way?
No, I wouldn't say lucky. I mean, there were definitely moments when...
Or big ticket people that you're like, holy shit.
Yeah. There was one time I had no idea, you know, just kind of today being the anniversary of bin Laden getting whacked, you know, today, right? What's today? May 2nd? Yeah. You know, as soon as he died, then a guy named AAA became the next... you know, the next target. He became the #1 guy. And that's Anwar al-Awlaki. And, you know, this is a guy that if you really look into his background, you know, you and I could have been in a 7-Eleven at any given moment in time in San Diego, and he could have been standing in line with us, right? Yeah. He lived amongst us during our time on the West Coast. Yeah. Isn't that crazy to think about, nuts. Right? Yeah. And he's a U.S. educated U.S. citizen, right? But he was Yemenis, you know, and, you know, he was one of the surprise targets I got to operate against, and was successful, you know, but it was also very controversial, right? Because Obama decided, yeah, we're going to go ahead and kill this dude. And it was literally the first U.S. citizen.
Without a trial, without.
Right. You know, it was like, you know, but he was gone from #2 to #1 of Al-Qaeda. Where Anwar is mostly known is through his YouTube videos, right? He was the guy that was literally leveraging social platforms to radicalize people all over the world, you know? So all of his videos were online there for the longest time. And he is actually probably he was more responsible for terrorist attacks than anyone else in AQ history because of his reach through the internet, right? If you look at like, what was it? Fort Sam Houston, was it Fort Sam? Where, you know, you had the colonel go and start shooting people. And, you know, we've had the Boston.
It was Fort Hood.
Fort Hood. And then you had the Boston Marathon bombing. If you take and look at all of these individual acts of terrorism in the United States, they are connected back to Anwar al-Awlaki. Yeah. You know, it's crazy. But having the opportunity to, you know, operate against him, you know, and even early on with bin Laden, you know, he had a fleet of vessels that, you know, I think he had roughly 20 plus vessels that I had the opportunity to operate against. And, yeah. And that was during the time span when everybody was, you know, operating against bin Laden. Yeah. I mean, yeah. The entire United States government was operating against the guy. But, you know, I've had those little moments that were pretty cool because it was big name targets. And you're like, all right, that's the kind of stuff you sign up for. That's the kind of stuff that makes you go,
varsity squad shit.
Fuck yeah. Like, yeah, this is, you know, you join the Navy and you, I would have never, you know, you never thought that you'd get to go and do things like that. Yeah. But the details of all of that is definitely in the right kind of crazy.
Yeah. Can you shed any light on operating against?
Yeah, I mean, operating against comes in varying formats. And, you know, but for me, you know, having be a breaking and entering kind of guy, you know, breaking in, you know, into a place can be categorized as two different reasons why you're there. And the first one would be tactical. There's going to be a tactical act against this target. So my job is to maybe sometimes just identify it. You know, I could put an infrared beacon, you know, outside the front door, just so the assaulters know that that's the right one. Or, you know, or it could be that would be more of a tactical approach. A technical approach is the second, right? Meaning I'm going to put a device that in place against the target. And so that's it's either going to be a tactical reason or a technical reason why I'm there. But usually what follows is all going to be just bad for whoever place I just went into. It's not going to be good for them if I got in and confirmed anything about this person, you know? Yeah.
Are there any movies via Hollywood that actually get it right as far as that type of shit, that where you can be like, yeah, that's actually pretty fucking realistic?
There are parts of Zero Dark 30 that kind of highlight some of the stuff that, you know, what it takes before the target actually gets taken down. I would even say go as far back as Black Hawk Down. There is one of my good friends and mentors. If you remember that movie, there's a guy standing in the souk by himself doing surveillance, and then later he's got his mountain bike over his shoulder.
Yeah, right at the beginning.
And then he steps onto a Black Hawk helicopter that picks him up on the beach, right?
Yeah.
So that guy became one of my mentors and led me down that more clandestine path, and is definitely just probably one of the smartest dudes, but also the most like savage motherfuckers you will ever meet.
Yeah. You think he would come on here?
I could ask him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
tell him we'll give him a handy on the couch.
Yeah, he is. And only the people who know him know who I'm talking about. Otherwise, they'll be like, oh, I didn't even pay attention to that scene in the movie. But that was real, and that was him. And he is a real person who, to this day, last I know, still is just doing amazing things.
Fuck, that's
by
awesome.
himself.
That's fucking cool.
Yeah.
I guess, you know, so beyond Zero Dark 30 and Black Hawk Down, I guess from a CMOE standpoint, the Mission Impossible, James Bond, newer James Bond stuff, like any of that, like I know it's all Hollywood and far-fetched generally speaking, but is there any of that kind of stuff, of the actually getting into targets and doing surveillance or digging through people's desks and picking fucking like that kind of shit that you see so often?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you.
Is it like that? I guess.
No. I mean, lock picking is, hell, I wouldn't even list it as a last resort. You know, a CMOE guy, whether it's, you know, it's me, or if you talk to any of our allied countries, and it's a very small world, obviously, we all had really the same mission, and that is to, you know, you want repeatable, reliable means of re-entry, right? Now, you would probably take those words and twist them around into something perverted, but reliable.
Why would you say that?
Reliable, repeatable means of re-entry. You're not going to do that with lockpicks.
Yeah, to me, that means solid game, right? Just like
I've got a key.
Yeah.
So making keys to a target is very much an old locksmithing skill. And myself and my CMOE partner, we probably could make a key to a target at the beginning. Before we implemented some technology, we could do it in like 7 minutes. Make a key on target, and then now you've got a functioning key that I made just by doing some tricks with the keyway that, you know, in the middle of the night. Later, we started creating technology that, you know, we could have a key made in literally a few minutes or less, just with the technology alone.
So if I see you on the Ring camera hanging out on my stoop for a couple of minutes, safe to say you're just making your own fucking key to the house.
Yeah, there you go. You know, but if you do it right, you're taking cameras into consideration. Yeah. And, you know, as you know, I got to play around with the world of disguise and disguise is definitely mandatory because you have to assume there's a nanny cam inside and that there's a some kind of camera on the outside.
Yeah, doorbell.
So you have to consider all of that, and the world of disguise is also a very small but big place. And I donated one to the Spy Museum.
I saw it, actually. I sent you that picture of me
Oh,
standing
yeah,
in
yeah.
front of it.
Yeah, so I put it up there, and then recently I got a letter from a certain agency, that had nothing to do with that disguise, say they're going to just go ahead and take it back now.
Really?
Yeah, so they took it from the museum, and from what I heard, they put it in their own museum.
Well, that's fucked up.
So, yeah.
Shit, it's already been out there. It's not like...
No, it was kind of cleared. It's not like I was doing anything wrong. It's just they just kind of just decided they wanted it back.
So disguise wise, similarly, like I think most people, even myself included, thinks of like the active Mission Impossible fucking melts to your face, super high speed disguise of what you can without getting yourself into trouble. What can you tell us about kind of the disguise game as it relates to?
Ironically enough, it's not stamped secret, right? It's a very sensitive world. But I would say that a lot of that world is no different than what is used in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Silicone and there's a lot of different materials that, they can cast a face and mold something to it. It's a process, but it by no means was invented by the United States government, right? I mean, this is a Hollywood thing that was then leveraged, by the government. It's actually really, really kind of cool in its own creative way. And if done right and implemented right, it is foolproof, right? Unless you get caught, like with a mask in your hand, then you're in trouble. But there's a lot of like forethought, right? So, people think of a mask as like it's animated. An animated mask moves, like if my eyebrows move, the mask eyebrows move. My facial features and facial muscles will then, control the mask that's on my face. And then there's the more non-animated, which I would say is like any Halloween costume out there where you buy a realistic mask, you put it on, and, nothing happens when I move my face. So there's a lot of branched off worlds. Even the puppet world plays a role here, because how mechanically a face moves, can be done by using kind of like puppet engineering. So, like any world, it's always bigger than you can think once you kind of get in there and you start looking around at all these different options. And but it is a great way to secure and ensure an operation, from beginning to end, because you have to assume that technology is watching.
Yeah, anonymity-wise, especially with facial recognition shit that they have now. So, I mean, is it safe to assume then that the animated versions are A, the preferred, and B, the most often used?
No.
Really?
Animated means it implies that you also speak the language, right? So if you no shit can speak that language, then you could get away with maybe an animated, but even then there's a certain amount of risk. Disguise is for the most part a distance thing, right? Or a camera thing. It's not a, hey,
blend in,
me and you hanging out together, right? That's taking an unusual amount of risk. It can apply to that situation, but there is distance and other things that are kind of in place, but just so that, you're not identified later kind of thing.
Would it be, I guess, fair to say that the non-animated version is a buffer so that you can just not attract attention and stick out like a set of dog's balls in a normal community or environment or whatever? I guess I'm just thinking of it one from the standpoint of like, sometimes, you're at a store and you see somebody that just seems fucking off.
Right.
Whether there's just something, you're like, wait a minute, like something's not fucking right. It's almost like a glitch in the system with fucking Matrix. It's like, wait a minute. To me, it would seem like a non-animated mask would bring that same level of like, the fuck is wrong with that guy?
Right. You wouldn't wear it in those situations. It's it's really, once again, to trick the eye and trick cameras from afar. I mean, it's no different than, it doesn't matter if it's some Hollywood mask or it's pantyhose over your face. It's
Well, I guess I'm just thinking like worst case scenario. Like I would rather, if I'm doing the CMOE thing, like I would rather have the animated in case somebody comes up to me that, so if you are like, even though it's not, I get that it's not designed, the non-animated is not designed to move and blend in. I'd still rather be that way in case it comes to that. Is it like there's an unexpected person walking their dog by or something or whatever, but
yeah, I see what you're saying. Once again, it goes back to your language skills, because an animated versus non-animated, when they're sitting still, you can't tell. Okay. Right? It's not like they look any different. It's just going to be movement versus no movement. And when it's at night, low light, and for me, I'm at the door doing my thing. And if someone were to walk up on me, for my personal SOPs was like, create pain and run away, but never say a word. Yeah. Because it's the description of you that matters, right? Yeah. But if I had the language and the dialect down, then but really it's not going to change. Create pain and get away is still the goal.
So is the reason for, to me, I guess I don't mean to hang up on it. It's just, if it's me, it's like, why not do the animated? Is it because it's easier to fuck up? It takes longer to put on it.
But yeah. There's a whole lot more to it. Yeah. Okay. There's a lot more to that world than.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
So you basically just want to use the bare minimum.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's employing something. You want to be able to do it quickly. Yeah. Things that I was doing, I could do in like 5 seconds, whereas there are other things out there take far longer. Yeah. And it just doesn't make sense for what you're doing. If I'm going to go and meet you and we're going to have a conversation and it's valuable enough meet, then maybe I'm going to go the more animated route. But
were there times that you did that?
No.
Were there any places where it was outside of English that you spoke it well enough to be able to pull that off?
No.
Yeah. To me, that's something where, like, even if English as a second language, like there's a difference between being able to speak it, be understood and whatever, and then blending in as though you're from there. Those are two totally different things,
Yeah. Me and like the first, Escape the Wolf book, I highlight cultural awareness for that reason. It's not, you look at America, you can take every geographical point in America and there's not going to be the same culture going on, right? Yeah. It is no different than any other country. So to know exactly, all those differentiators for the area you stand or you operate in is almost impossible. Yeah. Unless you grew up there and live there.
Yeah. Even here, it's like, maybe I've adopted a little bit of twang here and there of being in Texas for as long as I have, but like, especially the first few years I was here, especially where I was living at the time in a more rural area where there's way thicker accents. The second I start talking to somebody, so where are you from? You're not from here, it's like, that seems like it's almost impossible to pull off, but, from a ballpark CMOE standpoint, in you walking through and talking about all of the research and the surveillance and all that, was there kind of an average, and I know that it varies, but was there a ballpark average of how much time it took you to research, surveil, prep, and all that before you entered? Is it days, weeks, months? Just depends?
It kind of depends, because it's, operationally, sometimes these targets are being vetted for years, right? And so
then you come in 10 minutes, you fuck it all up.
Exactly. So some targets are, have a very lengthy and long vetting process, and some it's a little faster. Some it's like, and it was very rare where it was like, fuck it, just go do what you can do.
Yeah.
I
guess in the instances where you are starting the surveillance, and it's a self-contained operation, is that usually where it'd be, a few weeks or?
Yeah, it would be probably, weeks and months.
Yeah.
It'd probably be the average. What's funny is I'm out long enough now where I actually go, oh, fucking, I'm trying to remember some of this shit, and that's the beauty too, is I've been out long enough. I can comfortably say, knowing that, that world moves at the speed of light, that there's nothing that, I could really say that, compromises the integrity of anything that anyone else has got going on now, because it moves so fucking fast, right? I mean, the money and the training and the technology just allows that stuff to kind of fly by. And I'm just history and lost in time, and in my own memory so bad, I have a hard time remembering half the shit anyway. But there's the golden rule that you're referring to, is that, like, you're not going to get caught. Don't get caught, but always plan for it, really, for the most part with every target. So even the ones that, you've been vetting it for years, or the ones that, was very hasty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can only imagine that, like, if you've spent weeks or even months surveilling, researching, planning, prepping, that the stage fright that is built up to when you're actually on the fucking doorstep doing it, that's got to be palpable.
Yeah.
Like, where it's like, holy fuck, there's a lot riding on this. It's dangerous. I've just spent the last 2.5 months getting ready for this moment.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like 4th and 2, 3 seconds left, Super Bowl tied score. It's like, is there a big part of that to it?
Yeah, I would say it's an adrenaline dump, for sure. And I'm trying to kind of think back to those feelings. And I mean, I would compare it to, that same feeling you get when it was, for you and I, where we have the common ground, is driving those jet boats up to that Go Plat. And you're like, now I'm going to step off the bow of this boat onto that platform and then start going up these stairs to the unknown, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same, but I would bump it up a couple of notches, only because, most of the time I didn't have my buddies with me.
Yeah.
You're all on your own and by yourself. And, you're kind of just hoping that your rehearsals and your planning, that's all you can do, is just stick to your plan. Make sure your optional courses of action, because there's always something that's going to go wrong. And then, just go. Yeah. You just go and you get through it. And in the world of locks, anybody who's been doing it long enough knows it's also a little bit of luck. Yeah. There's if I'm making a key to a door, I can, in rehearsals, make that key pretty damn quick. But when it's actually time to do it for real, you're hoping, okay, this better go just as quick as it did.
Yeah.
In the rehearsal, because if it doesn't, that fucks with the timeline. If you start fucking with the timeline, that starts fucking with everything else.
Yeah.
And the timeline is everything when it comes to these operations.
Yeah. As far as oh shit moments, right? Like close calls on target or otherwise, is there any one or two that stand out as being the biggest asshole pucker factor?
There was one that kind of lended to my credibility, that always kind of is always there and is not easily forgotten. I'd gotten into a vehicle, put in a device, everything was fine for about 24 hours, and then that device wasn't reporting any longer, like exact 24-hour mark. I was like, fuck. And, I went through every aspect of the rehearsal right. I knew that the technology was working and everything was doing its job. And frankly, if there was going to be a problem, it should have happened in the first couple of seconds or minute while I was there. Then I would know, okay, now I need to troubleshoot. But it didn't. It was 24 hours, right? Which is just, it was mind-boggling. Why isn't this thing working? Why isn't this thing doing its job? And I've got now superiors going, why isn't this thing working? Why isn't it doing its job? Like, well, this was one of those rare moments that you have an opportunity to implement something, and now we take advantage of it. And the operation in itself was a huge success. But now this technology is deciding to fucking fuck with me. And that's what I felt like. But you start going through the checkoff list, and I start making phone calls and start trying to troubleshoot and figure it out remotely. And it goes back to an administrative problem. Because there was a certain amount of billing that came with this, and somebody was seeing the bills, they go, oh, we need to shut that thing off. That thing's costing a whole lot of money.
What bean counters.
What the hell did that? We don't know about. What is this? This thing that's costing all this money. And so they shut that fucking contract off for the way that device was communicating.
Oh, shit.
And so, I was like, oh, that was like a relief moment. Like, okay, God. It wasn't
my fault.
It wasn't me doing battery calculations wrong.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's what I was saying. I was like, holy shit, I didn't factor for whatever. What variable did I not factor for that caused this thing to eat up its battery life, in that amount of time and shut off, on a very important, gig. And so then it was like, oh, of course, leave it to these motherfuckers.
True bill strikes again.
Right. It's the, It was a money thing.
Yeah.
And they shut that motherfucker off.
So is it safe to say then, the methodology that you employed for, that crazy amount of prep work, that's what eliminates the oh shit moments, right? Is that somebody comes home early or an unexpected fucking blah, blah, blah. Again, this is, largely Hollywood stuff where it's like, oh, I'm doing this, and all of a sudden, oh shit, there's a noise and you got to hide. And were there ever any of those types of moments, or is that's the whole point of the surveillance?
That is why you're heavy on looking at a target. Reconnaissance is everything, no matter what kind of, whether it's on the field craft side, the trade craft side, surveillance, it can make or break, an entire operation. And yes, if you actually take the time and do it right, it eliminates a lot of those moments of getting caught. And frankly, with these types of operations, it is where the zero fail mission saying came from. It every single time it was a zero fail mission. Zero fail came from this world. I mean, and then it kind of bled out to everything else. But there is no room, because when you're doing things at that level, which is a national level, the outcome of it, if it goes wrong, is embarrassment to the United States government. It's an embarrassment, 100%. And even when the United States government says, we don't know what you're talking about, or they just deny it, or they just don't even comment on it, it's still an embarrassment, right? Yeah. It's still a big deal. And you don't want to be the reason why it's a big deal, or it's in the news or whatever, you know?
Yeah. I know a lot of these operations that you went on, I mean, most of them really, you were by yourself.
Yeah, for the most part, you're alone, or very, very small team.
Can you talk about like from start to finish what just a run of the mill operation would be like in terms of when you leave, how you get there, where you set up, or is that disclosing too much?
I mean, I'll generally, without giving up like TTP stuff, it's we know that there's the big reconnaissance piece and surveillance, and you got to identify everything that you would like with any other target, and then usually there's some phase timeline that you work backwards, and usually that will reveal other things that need to get done, but I would say taking your time is definitely the biggest component, in patience. It's no different than like I compare like, something like, that's become so popular like bear hunting or jujitsu. It's not about speed, right? It's about just the patience and waiting for the right moment to then, win, to win over your adversary in whatever manner you want, and having total control from beginning to end, and that's the key, like with a bow, you've got to get exponentially closer. You've got to understand camouflage, and you're going to implement every aspect that you can so that you're not detected by sight, smell from that animal. And there's a lot that kind of goes into the same with, this is the same with these types of operations. And as getting into jiu-jitsu, you're not trying to be the viper or the cobra and just strike. You're a boa constrictor, and you're going to just put the weight and patience into that person and let them expend all their energy. And then you're going to wait for your little moment, and then you're going to seize that moment, and you're going to win. So
weather the storm, take them into deep water and drown them.
Yeah. That one too. Yeah. Yep. And so, it's a patience game, and it's a long game. It's and there's a lot of strategy and a lot of, consequence you have to think about before you even get started. You have to think about every aspect of consequence.
Yeah.
Beforehand.
Yeah. What about those kind of unexpected factors of, let's say you're in country, you're in the middle of this process, and you get like really fucking sick, or you get in a car accident, or something unexpected that way, where now all of a sudden, because of an unforeseen circumstance, now you are on maybe that host nation's radar, or like.
Yeah. I would say traveling alone is, anyone could face that problem, and I certainly did. There was one moment when I ended up getting horribly sick, like deathly ill, and of course I didn't know it until later, but I was in the middle of nowhere by myself in probably the shittiest fucking country you could think of, and I suddenly got a temperature. It rocketed to 104, 105. I was trying to self-treat the best I could. And I remember like what I think was like hallucinations. And I was in this little shithole, like motel, if you will. And I remember it had a ceiling fan. And I remember closing my eyes, but I could still see the ceiling fan turning, It was like, what the fuck? And I'd open my eyes, close my eyes, and
your eyelids were invisible.
Yeah, it was, and I was crawling. You're talking vomiting and shitting razor blades almost all at the same time.
Yeah.
It was horrible. And I knew I had to do something, a little bit of that, corpsman background kicked in, and it was like, okay, this is bad. Like, I got to get the fuck out of here. And so I ended up flying out of that shithole to a different shithole in like a couple of hours, right? And there was a logistic system put in place for this that I had to like activate, and then got picked up, flew to the other shithole that just had better hospitals, and it was so fucking weird. I roll into this. I don't even remember. I remember driving myself. I remember it was daylight. And daylight was just so unbearable, that how bright it was for me. And, I remember looking down, my buttons weren't even lined up properly on my button up little shirt, and my pants, and I just remember feeling completely disheveled. And I walk into this clinic, and I thought I was dreaming because the dude spoke perfect English. And I was like, you speak English? And he's like, yes, I was educated at Harvard. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing here? It was, and it wasn't until afterwards I like confirmed these facts again, because I couldn't even trust my own mind at the time. I was so out of it. And immediately they hooked me up, IVs, draw blood. And I remember the person drawing blood. And being a medic, you're looking and watching. It's like, because of the state of mind I was in, everything was in slow motion. I remember this person literally putting the needle onto the syringe, pulling the cap off. And then I'm like, wait, they don't have gloves on. And they're touching my skin. They didn't even clean it with alcohol. All of that protocol that you're used to, right? And then the needle goes into my vein. They don't have gloves on. And then, you know, the whole process was just completely unsanitary. Yeah. And I'm like, what the hell? I don't care. Whatever. Just find out what's wrong with me. Right. So then they run and then I oh yeah, there's the other important part. I have my immunization. Right. And so I have this thing in my wallet and I pull it out and I'm showing it to them and I'm still just out of it. And they're pumping me full of fluids because I'm so dehydrated. And they're looking at my immunizations and they're drawing the blood. And anyway, it took them like a full 24 hours to figure out what was wrong with me because they were going by the fact I was immunized for a lot of stuff. So they didn't bother testing for that initially. Then they were like, you know what? We're going to go ahead and test them for everything. So it took a couple of blood tests for them to finally come to that resolution that, oh, we need to just test him for everything, even though he's been immunized. So it turns out I had typhoid times 2. I didn't have just one strand. I had 2 different strands of typhoid. And it was just, you know, usually the leading cause of death in a lot of those third world countries is typhoid because of dehydration. It's a miserable death because you are shitting and vomiting everything out of your body to the point where it feels like razor blades because it's acid, right? It's your own body that you're getting rid of now, you know, what stomach acids, everything. And so once they figured out that, hey, even though you're immunized, you still got it. And the reason being is at the time there's 118 strands of typhoid. Well, the immunization for it that we all take here in this country only cover for half of them. It doesn't cover for all of them, right? So
sounds like COVID.
Yeah, there is a little. There probably what history will tell, right? Yeah. That immunizations aren't foolproof. That's for damn sure. And anyway. I got it and anyway, survived it. And it took
they give you antibiotics for that?
Yeah, it's just antibiotics, you know, and within a week I was back to normal, which is crazy considering it was something that I felt like, at the time I felt like, oh my God, I'm going to die and nobody knows what it is. And I'm going to die in this fucked up shithole. Yeah. and then that'll be that. But yeah. Ended up antibiotics and good to go. And then
did you go back and finish, or
I did? Yeah, there was no going home. And that's one of the unique things about that kind of work is if you're on your own, you're on your own. You make your own decisions. Yeah, you know, I left with I would leave with a wad of cash and a mission, and off you go. And you know, and you definitely don't want to go back and say, well, I got sick. You know, and you know, in our world, that doesn't fly. Nobody gives a shit if you're sick. It's, did you finish the job? Yes or no? Yeah. And I was never going to go back and say, no, I didn't finish the mission.
Well, I was sick. Yeah, I didn't ask you if you were sick. I asked you if you finished it or not.
I don't care that you were sick.
Yeah. No, I know it. I mean, fuck, it's like the one job I remember I got food poisoning that was similarly bad in Vegas. I ate fucking clam strips from a Long John Silver's coming back from Vegas. And it was, you know, we drove through at like 9:58 right before they closed. And like a dipshit, I order clam strips and they're like cold. Yeah. And I ate them, you know, and by the time, you know, we get home and yeah, I was sick. I mean, I lost like 16 fucking pounds. Glenn had to come. I was living in Numbnuts' fucking guest house at the time in the college area. And yeah, he had to come and give me IVs and shit. But it was like, even then, it was like, what do you mean you're not here? I'm sick. I don't give a fuck if you're sick. You still got to come to work and prove that you're fucking sick. You know, it's like you can't just not show up and be like, I'm sick. Like, and it's like one of the few jobs where that just nobody gives a fuck, you know, what's wrong with you. But no, it's interesting.
It's ingrained. It becomes ingrained in you. And it's, once again, zero fail mission. So failure it has a broad definition, right? You not doing the mission is a failure. Yeah. So you get the job done, then you come home. Yeah. That's it.
In that line of work, I can only assume that counter surveillance is as important as the surveillance itself. You have to be able to understand if you're being surveilled and such. Were there ever moments where you caught people surveilling you while you're doing some of this stuff?
Oh yeah, all the time. I mean,
what did that look like?
You know, what people, you know, a lot of these third world countries, it can look like squatters. It could be the taxi drivers. You literally have to assume it's everyone because the government will pay them far more than what they're making.
Yeah.
Just to sit on that corner and squat, and that's what they do. And you're going to see the same people day in and day out. And it's real easy to get paranoid and go, oh, I saw that person again. Oh, I've seen that person again. But the countries that employ their citizens as surveillance becomes one of the biggest obstacles, because it's like, well, everyone
is a potential.
Right.
Yeah.
The woman working at the front desk at the hotel, the squatters outside, the taxi drivers, everyone I just mentioned. I mean, so it gets to the point where you just got to make sure you know what you're doing. And as long as you assume everyone is seeing what you're doing, if you assume everyone is hearing what you're doing, and if you assume that everyone is tracking every move you make, then you'll probably come up with a great plan.
Yeah.
But you just have to assume those three big things.
Yeah.
And then you'll have a great plan.
Yeah.
And that becomes a very creative and sometimes lengthy process. And creativity, I would say, is probably your biggest weapon, to be able to pull it off when or you think everybody is watching, from those three ways. But and I wish I could say that's mine, but that was probably one of the first pieces of advice I got from another legend in the realm, was that, just if you assume you're being watched, if you assume you're being heard, and you assume you're being tracked, then the odds are you'll come up with the best plan ever.
Yeah. That's fucking good advice, no doubt.
Yeah.
Were there ever any close calls, host nation or government wise, like where you almost got rolled up by anyone trying to do that or otherwise?
Not directly, no. Because if I had, I probably wouldn't be here, to be honest with you. And that's not to sound, cool or corny, but it's just, if they assume something, then then immediately they're going to act on it, because you just gave them something to then now leverage against you and put you in jail and hold you forever, like we've seen happen in Iran and a lot of different countries, hell, even Russia, right? China has done it. Everyone's done it to us, where you give them that little bit, man, your ass will be in jail for years. Yeah. So, your job is to give them absolutely nothing. But indirectly, you're talking the height of the Arab Spring. I was roaming this planet, and, indirectly, I, took a turn and found myself surrounded by 1,000 angry people. And I was all by myself with an embassy badge and a pistol, a cell phone with, zero charge and no minutes. Thank you, U.S. Embassy, for handing me that when I showed up. But so I had no 911 call to make. I had a badge that, if I would have showed it, probably would have definitely got me murdered, right? Because no one cares about the U.S. No one cared about if you were a U.S. Embassy personnel at the time. And a pistol that, if you've watched The Walking Dead, that's only going to get you so far when you've got 1,000 people to deal with. So I had my car, and I thought to myself, well, I could run over the first 10, and then I'm just going to high axle the vehicle, and my wheels will just be spinning, and they'll be really pissed off at me.
You'll get drug out and beat to death.
That's right. And so awareness, we talk about it, you hear about it all the time, but awareness is, in its most granular way, boils down to like really understanding human behavior. And I'm not going to say I'm an expert, but I learned a lot through those years of traveling and everything kind of falling on me. You start to really pay attention to people and their behavior. And in that angry crowd stood one soldier / law enforcement guy at the corner of my hood. And I remember looking at him, and he was younger, and he had an AK-47 slung. And I remember seeing sympathetic eyes. I was like, that guy cares about me. Even though my car was going back and forth, the passenger side tires off the ground, driver's side tires, people right here at the window yelling and screaming, but I saw those sympathetic eyes, and I went ahead and gave him the international sign of love and rescue.
For those of you just listening, it's the rubbing your fingertips together like it's money.
Money. Money, money, money. And that was one thing I did have a lot of, besides a pistol, you know, an embassy badge in my vehial.
And a bad attitude.
I had money.
Yeah.
And I was like, you want some money? And he's like, yeah.
I mean, can you say how much money you would usually roll out with?
Oh, geez. You know, it depends on, you know, who I was working for at the time. But I mean, sometimes you're talking, you know, 20, 30, 50 grand, you know? Yeah. Sometimes, you know, heck, there was one time when it was even more than that, right? Yeah. And it was a cash only job. But yeah, you got plenty of money. It's like, and so this kid with his gun, I saw yes in his eyes and a nod of his head, and I was like, come on over to the passenger door, right? And he took that rifle off, and he put his back to the passenger door. He pointed at everybody to create a bubble. I quickly unlocked the door. He got in, and I reached across and was like locking the door. And then I told him, okay, now point that gun out the windshield. And so sure enough, he pointed that gun at the windshield, and in just enough space for me to get some speed going to make them scared to jump in front of it. And that kid saved my life, no doubt about it. And then I took a turn, went a couple of blocks, took another turn, went a couple of blocks. I remember getting there, and it was like right near a gas station. I gave him his money, you know, and told him shukran, and he said off one.
Yeah.
And
do you remember how much you gave him?
For him, I mean, it was probably equivalent to $1,000-$2,000 easily. Yeah, in his currency. Yeah. Yeah, that's a lifetime of money for that kid. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, he probably was making a couple of bucks compared to what I just handed him. So that was enough to feed him, his family for several months, no doubt about it. And then, you know, the crazy part of what was going on then is here I was just a couple of blocks squared, and I could hear birds. You know, everyone was going about their business like it was a normal day. But in that moment, just 2 blocks squared away was fucking chaos and a life-threatening situation. God, you know,
sounds like nuts. Parts of Los Angeles.
It can be
fucking MacArthur Park versus fucking Venice Beach or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it just, you know, it goes to show that it really just doesn't matter where you are on this planet, man. Things can change on a dime, and you better be ready for it. And if you're not ready for it, you better get creative.
Yeah, no shit. Was there any operation that stands out as being like the shittiest, like conditions wise, of just being like, God damn it, like what the fuck am I doing here? Whether it's
most of the places I had to go to, you know, like you were mentioning like Mission Impossible, James Bond stuff, and
everything's clean and fucking technologically advanced. Right, it's the exact opposite.
Yeah, there was no 5-star hotels or Aston Martins, none of that. I was always like, fuck. This fucking sucks. Yeah. It was always shithole safe sites, or, you know, mediocre at best hotels, if you want to call them a hotel or a motel. You know, the environments were always crap. The food was always crap. You know, you kind of start remembering those general rules, right? Like, you know, if you're 15 minutes or more away from a shoreline, then don't eat the seafood, right? Yeah. You know, you really take that, like, look at us. We're here in Dallas and we can go out to a restaurant and safely eat seafood. Yeah. You know, and you take that for granted. Yeah. Over there, you're like, nope, 15 minutes is still too far, right?
If I can't see the fucking water, I'm not eating it.
Yeah. I remember there was one place that I would kind of frequent. It was called... Saba.
The fuck did you just rattle off?
Saba Baba. So seven brothers. And it was this, it was like really the only restaurant had a set menu, and you knew that you were going to get fish and rice, and that was it, right? And it was family style eating. So imagine, like, here's the white guy. Here's the white guy walking in, and, you know, if there was a record, it would have screeched, and everybody would have turned their head and looked at me. And I was like, yeah, whatever. You sit down, and and of course, I had to figure out that there was no menu.
I'll take the food, please.
showing up and sitting down was the menu, right? Because you were just getting whatever they put in front of you.
Yeah.
And it was foil wrapped up, and it was on a paper plate. And so I was like, huh. So you unwrap the foil, and you kind of stretch it out, and there was a whole fish sitting in there, and then there was rice. And it was the best fucking fish and rice I have ever had.
Oh, shit.
And you would have never guessed. And so, I mean, once you kind of eat, you learn too, like, it's this balance of you don't ever set a routine, but when you find a safe place you can eat and you didn't get sick, it's really difficult not to go back there, right? And so there was times, and it's like, do not, I tell myself, do not set a routine. Do not set a routine. That's how you get targeted, right?
Just DoorDash it. Be fine.
Yeah, exactly. Goes back to the rugged life. Oh, Clint, why weren't you just fishing for your own fucking food? But I didn't have time for that shit. So, yeah, you end up finding a good place to eat. You eat it. And so point being, as you asked, like worst places, it always amazed me that even in the worst condition, worst places on this planet, there was always, like, you could find like really good food or, these beautiful scenery or environments. Like, you're just like, holy shit. I remember, like, there was a beach where it was just this crazy ass black lava rock. And you're like, I can't believe this is here, right? With with the incredible ocean and this blue water crushing down on it. And you're just sitting there staring at it like, how the hell did this get here? It's just an incredible sight. Or, another breakfast joint that had the best fried eggs I've ever had. Or, heck, you remember when we were in the
Dubai with the beef?
Dubai with the beef. Yeah. Or the Philippines with that steak place. Yeah. Remember going to the jungle?
It was like a Spanish restaurant that served steak.
And had the best fucking apple pie.
Yeah.
I remember we went there multiple nights, middle of a jungle, and it had like, I think it was called like Planet Hollywood, but it was a knockoff or something, right?
Yeah, something like that.
And we would drive in.
They had the best fucking sashimi too, tuna sashimi. Yeah. It was fucking phenomenal.
Middle of a jungle,
yeah,
right? I mean, who would have thought? And so, yeah, it's, I mean, the shitholes end up actually not looking all that bad if you just kind of open your eyes and look around.
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of like Anthony Bourdain's show back, God rest his soul. He would go to all these fucking obscure places similarly and, have like family dinners with people in their houses or, eat at these little bazaars and markets. And that is kind of one of the neat common denominators of the human experience is, everybody has to fucking eat. And, the different cultural influences, but there's some phenomenal food everywhere that, is totally different maybe from anything you've ever eaten, but the experience and the flavor and the taste and everything is, some of the best things, I've ever eaten have been all over the world,
right.
It's really, really neat that way. But, so from I guess from a conditions standpoint, similarly, were there, missions where you actually had to swim in infiltration wise, or was it always, I guess, that you can talk about?
Well, I will say there was one that I put together. It included a swim, and it was probably, definitely the coolest email I'd ever received. So here I am putting together this wazoo fucking crazy, never before done mission, and I kind of submit it up through the chain of command, which was my immediate CO overseas, and then it would go to, at the time, the JSOC commander, which was McCraven, and so he replied to all, which was kind of unusual, and all it said was 2 words, and it was the best email I've ever gotten from a Naval Special Warfare leader. Just said, "Good luck." And I was like, wait a minute. And then I was waiting, right? You wait a day, or you wait a couple hours, and you wait a day or so waiting for my immediate CO to somehow counter that, because that's what we're used to, right? Yeah. It's like the big bosses get to say yes to everything, but it's the middle management guys.
The guy that's accountable for you is like, nah, I don't want you doing that shit.
Yeah, let's wait a minute here, because this might make me look like an idiot if it doesn't work out, So it was definitely... probably one of the coolest things that cool. The email in itself made it cool because unfortunately, I think over the last couple of years, McRaven's kind of gotten labeled a
bit of a liberal.
Yeah,
you know, that way.
So,
I mean, he was hugely anti-Trump, and then he took, you know, the dean position at UT Austin, which, you know, isn't exactly a conservative bastion.
Yeah,
here in the state of Texas, and he's written some op-eds that have been pretty unexpected, politically influenced and unexpectedly so that way, which, you know, I mean, I have mixed feelings on it. I think guys in positions like that, from my perspective, yes, you're entitled to your opinion. It's a free country. I just think from an optics standpoint, it makes more sense for guys that, you know, are career, you know, military officers at high leadership positions that then get into politics, or even, you know, whether it's not politics, just generally speaking, should stay a little more neutral that way. I think, you know, I think because the military is supposed to be apolitical, when guys that spent their entire lifetime now take a hard line side, really either direction, I think that confuses the guys that, you know, that maybe used to work for them and now are still in, or whatever. It makes it harder to be apolitical as a military when guys aren't maintaining that outside, and they were big figures when they were in, you know, whether it's Mattis, fucking McRaven, McChrystal, I mean, any of those guys, right. You know, I just think, you know, it's a tough, I can see both sides, and I can imagine, you know, putting myself in their shoes, it would be hard to just kind of ride out to pasture and not go that route, because at that point, I mean, if you're in your 50s and you're starting over career-wise, like what the fuck else is there if you've spent that amount of time doing something like that? But anyway,
it's probably not necessarily good for branding.
Yeah. But anyway, so there was a swim included. That's what the ultimate.
With that plan, yes, there was. But I'll leave it at that. I don't, you know.
One thing that I know surprised me a little bit, and maybe people listening, is, you know, you just mentioned you came up with this wazoo idea. Is that's how a lot of, if not most, of your missions were from, you know, things that you kind of thought up, right? A lot of them?
Well, it's not just me. I mean, like, I think one of those, when you get to, like, national level commands or agencies, the liberty that operators and operatives alike have is pretty substantial. Yeah. You know, we have always said it in the SEAL teams that the enlisted truly run our world, right? Yeah. Our organization is run by senior enlisted, seasoned guys, and that definitely stands true at the national level stuff. And so they expect it, you know, and having that and giving guys that entrepreneurial kind of exposure, I think, is why you have so many SEALs specifically that get out and kind of have these successful entrepreneurial careers. And, you know, we get all those folks that come along and say, well, you guys aren't exactly the quiet professionals or silent operators. And it's like, well, you know, during the time, yes, we are.
Where you needed.
You didn't know who I was for 20 plus years, right? And by the way, the paycheck I was getting coincides
with you not knowing who the fuck I am.
That professionalism, you know. And then once you end that career and you start something new, and you're not getting paid by the United States government anymore, and you're doing your own thing, and as long as you're not compromising the safety of your buddies with whether it's a book or, you know, this interview, then whatever, do whatever the fuck you want, right? Yeah. You know, and so the quiet professional thing, it's important when you're in. It's not really all that important when you get out, because the reality is most of the operations we conduct, it's not that they're like secret. The real secret of any operation is time on target.
Yeah.
Like when.
Yeah.
When am I showing up is the most sensitive thing of any operation.
Yeah.
You can know my tactics, you can know my technology, but as long as you don't know when I'm coming,
you can't be on guard 24/7.
Right, then you're not going to win.
Yeah.
And that's really, I think, you know, the key of when you talk about, you know, guys that get out, as long as they're not giving up, you know, all the details and shit then really at the end of the day, it doesn't matter as long as you don't know that time on target. But entrepreneurial piece is given to the SEAL community, and it's worked for us. It's worked against us. But I would say the community doing that has given us an edge and has given us an advantage over the other components, 10 times.
Yeah.
I think giving guys liberty to come up with plans and these missions is the best thing you can do as a leader.
I think most people would assume that it's, again, driven from what most people's experience with this community or these experiences consists of, which is Hollywood, which is it's handed to you, here is your next fucking gig.
Right.
And that's largely not how it happens. But
No.
I do love that, the whole silent professional thing. That is a criticism that I think any of us who, have books or podcasts or are out in the limelight, so to speak, is, it's like I was when I needed to be. Mm-hmm. I don't need to be anymore, and I agree. Like, I think there's a right and a wrong way to do it. And I think some guys do it the right way and some guys don't. Yeah. And that's, I think the 80-20 rule kind of applies, that if most of the community is okay with how you're conducting yourself, it's going to be 10% that motherfuck you no matter what. There's going to be 10% that don't give a shit what you do, no matter how egregious it is. That average 80% in the middle, if they're largely like, yeah, it's a good dude, I'm all right with, then I think that's probably all right. But do you find now that because of all of the experiences that you've had doing all that kind of stuff, that, the countless years of training and operations and what have you, that your life now, day in, day out, little intricacies of day-to-day life are significantly affected in terms of what you pay attention to, how you live your life? Like, is that something that never goes away?
I'd say when I first retired, I'd say you have that hypervigilance thing, and your awareness is, for me, was pretty much through the roof. But what does this civilian life do to us? Kind of brings everything down a couple of notches. Yeah. The further we are from, those types of jobs, it certainly your level of awareness and vigilance starts to kind of decrease a little bit here and there too. Yeah. I think it's only natural, Yeah. But I have my moments, like you got to remind yourself, oh, wait a minute, you're putting yourself out there. So if you're putting yourself out there, that means you got to kind of, put forth a little more energy into, looking out for whatever it is around the corner, and making sure you're still staying safe and sound. No different from anybody who puts himself out in the public view. They should all be, taken into that situational awareness, personal awareness, cultural awareness, third-party awareness being the big one.
Yeah. In terms, I guess going back, one thing I wanted to bring up on that being out in the public, which kind of coincides with what you're talking about, is depending on how much you are or not, can dictate how vigilant you need to be. But there's another component to that being out in the public aspect that I think is important, is that if you think about the Popular Mechanics article, all of Dick Marcinko's books, and the movie Navy SEALs, those three things, remove those three things from ever being out there, and our generation, I think there'd be half the amount of guys that ever even knew enough about the SEAL teams to actually go try to be one.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we had a Vice President Biden at the time use, and Obama, they used the bin Laden raid politically. Yeah. And so if we would have remained in the shadows, we certainly would have come out of the closet even more so then. Yeah. Well, I think that definitely enhanced it, right? We had articles, we had some books, we had a movie, but I think the bin Laden raid certainly. I don't know. There's a lot of factors there. But look at what we did. Going into Iraq, we allowed media to be on the battlefield with us.
We had a guy from Fox News on the ribs with us when we went to take down the GoPlat.
And he became a very Steve? What's his name again?
It was John Scott.
Oh, Scott. Yeah, I thought Centeni or whatever his name is.
Steve Centani. Maybe it was.
Yeah, it was Steve Centani on that one. He was on the rib, and now he's a pretty popular guy. At least was on Fox. I don't know.
He got fucking kidnapped later.
Is that? Oh yeah, that's right. That was the other piece. Yeah.
Yeah. But
yeah. Anyway, I think yes, I agree with you. I think none of that, you know, helped the community, but at the same time, I mean, it was inevitable as soon as you start putting journalists in every aspect of the war.
Yeah, I guess I just mean from a recruiting standpoint, there is an element of you've got to inspire each, you know, consecutive generation and give guys who are cut out for that line of work a reason to go do it.
Hell yeah.
And or there's not going to be any of them, you know.
Right.
And I know the Popular Mechanics article, the Dick Marcinko books, Rogue Warrior in particular, and the movie Navy SEALs, those were 3 hugely impactful events that I saw or read, you know, was exposed to that were a big part of me wanting to be a fucking team guy. The movie The Rock too, even though the SEALs get smoked by a bunch of Marines, but that's
but it had. I mean, that was all of the first phase instructors for me.
Yeah.
We're all in The Rock.
Yeah.
You know, that's Danny Chalker, who's a fucking legend in the SEAL community. You had Joe Haas, who is also equally a legend. Yeah. You had Steve Decker. I mean, you had those were. I mean, to show up to Bud's
and see these dudes, you're like, what the fuck?
Especially, I mean, it was Master Chief Danny Chalker was Bud's Master Chief.
Yeah, he secured my Hell Week.
Yeah, and I was just like, oh my god, it's him.
Yeah.
He's also known as Snake in any of Dick Marcinko's books because of his eyes. I don't know if you ever had a chance to look into his eyes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they were fucking snake eyes.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, the media certainly is taking that SEAL path and kind of bounced it into the limelight. So, you know, we certainly haven't done anything that hadn't already been done, and it's going to continue on.
Yeah.
Because it's been sexy for quite some time now. I'm actually surprised it's lasted this long, the SEAL brand.
Yeah.
I thought it would die off, you know, and things would go back to normal, but it just continues and continues, you know.
Well, you're a cool guy, Clint, you know? I mean...
Not me, no. It's those...
That's your fault. Don't be so fucking cool.
Yeah, no, it's... I think it's a collective. Team guys being successful continues the light to be, shined on the career.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I could ask you fucking questions and try to get you to reveal shit you're not supposed to all day long, but I know we do have another show to conduct, and the big reason why you're here is The Rugged Life. Again, go pick this fucking book up. You will not regret it. It's chocked full of fucking legitimately really useful information. And I appreciate you coming on to take the time to talk about it and some of the things that we haven't had a chance to discuss on here previous.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, Mike. It's always good to hang out, buddy.
For those of you still listening, Clint, myself, and my other co-host, Matt, are going to jump on the Uninfluenced show, and we're going to talk about cars and motorcycles and shit like that here in a minute. So I encourage you to check that show out as well if you want to see Clint talk about some of the crazy driving that he's learned over the years via Uncle Sam, and we'll get into some of the intricacies of that. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. Clint's been a good friend of mine for over 20 years, which is hard to fucking believe. Yeah. We kind of grew up in the SEAL teams together to a certain degree, and he's one of my closest friends, and I can't thank him enough for coming here. I hope all you guys go out and support his book, as well as all the places that you can find you in terms of some of the other stuff that you offer, if you want to run down that real quick.
Yeah, I'll keep it simple. You can just go to ClintEmerson.com. And that's the ecosystem lives there.
All right. For those of you who continue to support this show episode after episode, I can't thank you enough for your support. We damn sure appreciate you. And until next time, this is Mic Drop.